Mira Business FM, the morning drive. More positive, actually, figures coming out of Abu Dhabi. The residential property market just delivered its biggest year on record. Sales surging to more than 73 billion dirhams in 2025. Transactions up something like 55%. We'll check all of this with our guest in a moment. Off-plan developments dominating the market. So, strong demand, rising prices, new project launches driving the momentum, but there are questions, of course, about supply, as there always are, investor sentiment, what the market could look like in 2026. So let's address those. To break down the main points of another new report out at the moment, Andrew Laver is here. Andrew is the director for Abu Dhabi at the property consultancy Cavendish Maxwell. Nice to see you again.
Good morning. It's good to be back again.
Good to have you here. Ramadan Kareem indeed, all the way from Abu Dhabi again. I should sort of caveat this first, Andrew. I haven't read the whole report. I've been through the summary of the report. I have a number of different questions. But I suppose let's start with just how significant this kind of headline sales figure is, this 73 billion for Abu Dhabi's property market, because from the outside looking in, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and obviously the percentage increase of 55% is something that we were certainly looking forward to, and we were hoping for, seeing that what had happened in 2023 and 2024. And there's been a continued level of confidence in the marketplace. I think with the level of supply that was coming into the market, there could have been a situation where people felt that there was potentially an oversupply, and the prices were maybe a bit too strong. But those units that have come onto the market, and as you rightly mentioned, a significant number of off-plan, have continued to be purchased. And when those products are then purchased and those units are handed over, there's a continuation in the marketplace that people want to buy more properties. They want to improve their position in the marketplace. They want to aspire to better things. And those property sales, whilst the volumes are up, the values are also significantly up as well.
Right.
It would be good to see, or it'd be maybe shall we say, slightly cautious to say that sales volumes are up, but the prices haven't really moved, or rental rates haven't moved. But if I'm looking at the report, and I'm seeing, like you would say in the stock market, you're looking at the greens and reds, it's got green written all over it the last sort of 12, 18 months in Abu Dhabi. And I think that's a positive sentiment for both, whether it be investors or purchasers themselves. And it's not necessarily fixed to one element of the market. So obviously, a vast majority, I think is about 14,500 of those sales were apartments. It's not 80 or 90% of those transactions, that 73 billion that's apartments. There's also an increase in volume and an increase in prices of villa properties as well. So you're seeing the entire market in Abu Dhabi moving forward concurrently at the same sort of pace, which is very positive. And obviously, I'm sure we're going to talk about things like, the supply and what the developers do. And they're listening to this. And they're helping that by providing more stock to the market, but at a manageable rate. And I know last time we were talking about the number of units that were going to come on, and are we going to hit the number? And we were talking about the 8,000. We didn't get to 8,000, but we came very, very close. We got, I think it was 7,600 units, which is a lot of units.
That's pretty good going.
That's a good going, yeah. And if you look at the actual size of the market and the number of developers, that's a good number of units, considering what's actually the stock at the moment. I think at the last count before 2025, we were looking at around about 300,000 units. So that's a good number of units per year coming through into the marketplace.
Well, I have a benchmark for how well the property market does, and it's based on absolutely zero science. It's not even art.
Okay.
I don't think it's even alchemy. I'm not sure what it is. It's just me in my head.
Okay. We'll try and get into
I'm trying to get there. But I'm judging it by... it's crazy. I judge it by the look on people's faces. I've just been talking to somebody in property this morning, and I'm trying to judge the positivity level which I think is still quite high. I'm looking at you smiling this morning because this is a positive report. So that tells me that the trajectory that we saw 2024, 2025 has continued into 2026. We're in very unusual times. It's an extraordinary time at the moment. So that taints things, I guess, hopefully temporarily. But transactions up, is it 55% in a year? That's the figure. What is it that is behind that surge in demand, do you think?
I think there's a certain appeal to Abu Dhabi. I think there's obviously a marketplace where everybody looks at, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and we've obviously talked about this. Abu Dhabi is now offering a much wider offering to individuals and families, whether it be from an education point of view, whether it be from a social and leisure point of view, whether it be from a travel point of view, and also diversity in the actual real estate. I know diversity is one of these catchwords that everybody likes to use, but I think if we go back to, say, before 2020, a lot of the product that was being produced was very similar. And I think in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a real spread in terms of types of units, sizes of units, products, the add-ons, the pluses that are offered by developers within those projects. And because of that, because of the spread in the marketplace in terms of what's being offered, it appeals to a much wider market. And I think that is offering a lot more opportunities to whether it be purchasers, but at the same time, we're also looking at rental rates increasing. So that means that it's not just purchasers looking at properties that are wanting to actually buy these units. Investors are actually able to get tenants willing to pay those rental rates for those properties, which gives the investor the confidence that the market is actually trajecting in the right direction. And I think obviously we were just sort of briefly looking at it, and we could say, well, at the moment we're looking at the 2025 report. But just quickly before I came on, over the last couple of days, we've had a quick look at the January, February numbers, and those have continued. So this is not just a 2025 item. This is not something that just happened in 2025. This is something that appears to have started in late 2024. There was momentum picked up. It ran through 2025. And now in the early part of 2026, we've seen in January, February, similar numbers, very strong numbers, very robust property prices continue with people willing to pay market prices for those units. And I think we talk about the supply into the marketplace. That supply has continued and the launches have continued. And it shows the strength of the market that over the last 3 to 4 months, and obviously this is not 2025 to 2026, but looking at now something a little bit different in Abu Dhabi, where we've now got a number of branded residences coming into Abu Dhabi, which shows that, again, the market is evolving. It's growing to an even wider marketplace than it was before, where it was focusing on predominantly traditional residential units, whether villas or apartments. It's now looking at branded residences where you've got brands such as Manchester City came in, we've got Four Seasons, Shangri-La, etc., doing branded residences. Not copying a model, but doing our own thing. So it's been a very positive 2025, and I think those numbers are certainly growing as we speak.
And that's continuing. Excuse me, this cough is driving me insane. But I mean, Abu Dhabi is heavily, something like 70% off plan. So, buyers very much drawn to the Abu Dhabi proposition, if you like.
Absolutely. And I think when you take a look at the stock of units in Abu Dhabi, if you go to any market around the world, the real estate, the amount of properties in the real estate can never cater at that point in time to what can be a growing population. And I think if we look at the growing population across the UAE over the last 2 to 3 years, whether it be 3, 4, 5, 6% increase every year, there needs to be residential units to allow people somewhere to live. Well, there's just no stock. And I
thought you said graying population there for a second, and I thought, is he looking at me?
I did have a shave. Just apologies. It's down here. It's not. This is just losing hair.
Same boat.
And this is not from work. But so that means that there needs to be a much bigger supply of off-plan properties coming to the marketplace in order to cater for these people. And I think what you've got is, because you have a number of developers and they have the ability to cater to, as I've said before, a much wider market, we have a bigger supply. And looking forward, I think at the moment we're projecting 315,000 units. We're looking at, by the end of 2028, somewhere in the region of about 360 to 370,000 units. We're looking at between 10 and 15,000 units per year. But we also know that in the marketplace, with supply chain requirements, project deliveries, some of those units will most likely be delayed. Not everything is going to go on time. And as such, looking at the numbers and obviously in the report, we're saying that there's a potential for 15,500 units in 2026. But realistically, we're looking at between 6,000 and 10,000 units. Now, if we take a step back and look at what we did in 2025, we were between 7,000 and 8,000 units, and the market improved. So if we're going to be putting a similar number of units into the marketplace, and we already have a marketplace that's very positive, it's very confident, it has a lot of confidence in what the market's telling them and the developers itself, then I would hope that during 2026, the trends that we've seen in 2025 would look to continue. We'd hope that property prices, etc., continue to grow.
What's the split? What's the ratio between, off-plan and end user, investor end user?
I think there's still a continuation in terms of Abu Dhabi is very similar. We don't get the exact data in terms of purchases, but what we do know is when we're doing valuation work, there's a high proportion of those units are tenanted, which means a lot of those projects that we go to are owned by investors. And I think we look at the nationalities in terms of when we do get the sales and purchase agreements or the memorandums of understanding, that we do see a wide variety of purchases from across not just the region, but globally, coming to the property market. And I think that will continue. And I think as long as the market continues to offer a product that people want and demand, which it is at the moment, then, as they say, build it and they will come. Then the property market will continue to grow and evolve. And because there's a bigger spread of unit types, whether it be sizes of projects, what they're offering, whether it's valet, concierge, I've seen cinemas in projects, special F&B offerings, etc. People can find the property that they want at the right price point, whether it be an investment or as an owner-occupier. And I think looking at the population, people when they come in, we talked about this last time, once they've been here a couple of years, may look at buying. They realize that they're going to settle here. Why rent? Especially when rents are obviously increasing. In a lot of projects, it makes a lot of sense to actually buy, because if you look at the monthly costs, it's actually more affordable for them to buy. So why not get on the property market and put a bit of money into your retirement fund, so to speak?
You can see why those conversions happen, can't you?
Yeah.
And I guess as well, an immediate observation to something you pointed out just now, there's more to come. Yeah. There are more options going to be available. What about when it comes to growth, though? Because apartment prices were up something like 15% last year. That's some pace. That's going well, isn't it? Yep. Is that a sustainable level?
I think maybe 15% for 2026, and obviously we are early days in 2026 to know where those prices are going to go. But from what we've seen in the initial valuations that we've been doing and the sales and purchase agreements and MOUs that people have been signing, those prices have continued to grow into 2026. So it's not a hard and fast line. So when we finish 2025, that's where it's sort of curtailed. That has rolled into 2026. And I think it should continue. To what level? Again, it's very early doors to actually make a prediction. But the fundamentals of the real estate market in Abu Dhabi haven't materially changed from 2025. So it'd be amiss for us to say that there should be any significant change in what's happening or what's going to happen in 2026 if the underlying basics remain consistent.
Yas Island, popular as ever. Al Reem Island, as popular as ever. Strong price growth. There, no reason to assume that those places are going to be anything other than attractive, I guess.
No, and I think obviously 2025 was really the headline in terms of Abu Dhabi, in terms of obviously Yas Island was the announcement in terms of Disneyland.
Yeah.
And I think that really is a big statement for Abu Dhabi, to attract something like Disneyland to Abu Dhabi. And I think the property market as a whole has had a lot of confidence in terms of what's being produced. And again, we're seeing Yas Island, those property prices have increased. Rental rates haven't necessarily grown as much in 2025 because in 2024 they saw a good level of growth. So they've eased off a little bit. But then you look at other areas, say, for example, Jubail Island, the project that's being built on Jubail Island, hundreds and hundreds of villas, apartments, very strong demand. We're starting to see some of those units coming close to handover. Those property prices have increased. It's a project that people really like. It's situated between Yas Island, Sadia Island, and obviously the May Line, so it's perfect for commuters. And then Sadia Island has obviously in recent months has launched the Zayed Museum, the Museum of Natural Science. There's a number of other projects that are adding to what the islands or those master plan developments actually offer. And there's continuing development. Every time we go into Abu Dhabi, on my commute every day, there's a new project. There's a hoarding going up. But it's also interesting that it's actually obviously with Abu Dhabi and geographically how it's formed, there's now an expansion of Abu Dhabi outwards. So it's now moving towards the airport, and obviously from the airport you have a lot of large land bank that can be potentially developed. And now there are developers looking at that. So for example, Soba came into Abu Dhabi. They have a project that they're looking at. There's a number of national housing, UAE national housing projects that are being developed. And these are adding to the impetus of the real estate market. Sounds very positive, but I mean, you're telling the true story.
Well, I mean,
it's what you see when you go into Abu Dhabi.
It was always. I mean, I lived in Abu Dhabi years and years ago, and when I tell you the price of my apartment, which I will in a minute, you'll realise how long ago this was. But it was always talked about then that it would kind of move off the island, and we forget that Abu Dhabi is an island. I think in a lot of ways. But I had a flat, an apartment. Sorry. In the blood bank area. I was right next to the blood bank, Bankal Dim, and I used to call it Bankal Tim. Taxi drivers thought that was funny. I thought it was funny. It was an in-joke for years. Tourist club area. Yep. And it was a 2-bed apartment. It was an old building, but it was 24,000 dirhams a year.
Yes.
So it's a very long time ago. It's not
3-4 times that probably.
I kind of thought, well, I was going to ask you actually about rents in Abu Dhabi because, they are rising and apartment rents are up. How are tenants? How do tenants feel?
I think tenants realise that over the past few years, rental rates have been relatively subdued. And I think at some point in the future, there was going to be a situation where those rental rates would increase. I think there's been a lot of demand. And whilst those rental rates have increased, your example is a prime case that, even if we look over the last couple of years, rental rates have increased. But that's not to the detriment of the building owners having good occupancy. We're seeing those rental rates increase, but from a commercial valuations point of view, when we look at valuations for clients who have ownerships of buildings, their occupancy rates are still over 95%. So even if the rental rates are going up, people are still wanting to stay in those buildings and willing to pay those rents. We obviously do have a rent cap in Abu Dhabi that's capped at 5%. But new projects that come online, those rents can be set at whatever those market rents are, and they follow the marketplace. And if I take, for example, where I live in Al Reef, the rental rates for apartments and villas have noticeably increased. Are we seeing more units empty? No. No. And that's why the investors are happy in terms of purchasing, because they're getting a very strong return.
Developers are planning, tens of thousands of new homes over the next few years, not many years. How much could that new supply cool prices? What do you look ahead and view it as being?
I don't think it's going to cool the prices as such. I think the rate of growth may not be as, say, for example, what we saw in 2025. But I think the price increases will continue. An example would be there's been a number of, in the press of land purchases in Abu Dhabi, significant land acquisitions. And there's a number of people currently looking at their land bank, which is outside the city. And I think if we then take Abu Dhabi geographically, again, those projects may not have an impact on what is happening inside the city because they're catering to a slightly different demographic. So we look at projects, say, for example, Ahana, or we look at Al Jerf outside the city, the commuter developments. There's a land purchase sort of midway between Abu Dhabi, potentially again, we could be looking at more projects being developed there. We're looking at it moving outside the city, and I think prices should increase. The supply is coming online. It's not a huge supply. It's going to be occupied. And I think the demand continues to be there from purchasers. Certainly the early part of 2026 has reiterated that point when we've looked at those numbers. We've continued very strong in the early part of 2026. And I think anybody who's looking at this, and obviously we've released our report, in Abu Dhabi, we're very lucky. We mentioned this last time that we have the Abu Dhabi Real Estate Centre. And they continue to publish daily data on sales prices. They continue to publish, I think they've just released their H2 report. And that continues to give data sets on how the market is going in Abu Dhabi and continues to reiterate the positivity in Abu Dhabi. And that's from a government point of view. That's what they're seeing. And we go back to developers. The developers aren't going to build it if nobody's going to be there, and the developers are still building. So they obviously know something that we're hoping that's going to trend in the right direction.
And we go back to the big smile on the face there again as
Still
well.
smiling.
So I'm still judging.
The sun is
you.
out. We're good.
That's my index for you.
Stop raining.
So I don't mean to chuck a damper on this actually, because it is.
That's okay.
Overwhelmingly it is a positive story. But the backdrop currently is obviously geopolitical tension, and there are questions over how much that influences investor sentiment. How sensitive do you feel, or are you seeing, anecdotally or evidentially, how sensitive is Abu Dhabi's property market to global events, do you feel?
I think any property market, if we look back to 2008, 2013, any of those property cycles, anything that happens around the world, there has always been people confident in the real estate market. Obviously at Cavendish Maxwell, in regards to what's going on at the moment, we as a company, we don't provide sort of comments in regards to what's happening at the moment. But looking at the volume of work that we've been doing over the last week or two, the volume of work that we've continued to do over the last couple of weeks has remained consistent. We're still seeing people purchasing properties. We're still seeing robust property prices. I was looking through a couple of MOUs that were signed last week. They are still above where the previous transactions were for units of that type. So the property prices are still remaining strong. And we're still seeing inquiries, and we're still seeing good volumes of work in terms of what we're doing. So at the moment, it's difficult to say, but as I said, we don't really comment on what's going on geopolitically. We are aware that it's happening, but our focus is on the data and what the data is telling us. And we focus on the transactional data. We focus on the transactional volumes, what people are paying for those properties. That, in essence, tells us what the market value of the property is.
And the data is the story.
Continue, and every property has a story.
Yeah. So look ahead to the rest of 2026, Andrew.
forward to
Here's the crystal ball question. I love
Here we
doing
go.
this. Could you dust off that mini crystal ball on the end of your
try.
key ring? But what indicators are you watching in the residential sector?
I think what we would be looking at is, we look at the supply coming online. Mm-hmm. We look at the volume of transactions that are going through, also the appetite of purchasers. What we typically do is in 2025, there was a product that was released, and I forget the name now, from the top of my head, by the Abu Dhabi Real Estate Centre that would govern the advertising of properties in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
So in previous years, it was a case of one unit could be marketed and you'd find 15 versions of the same advert. That's gone. So you have to be registered and approved to actually market a unit on behalf of a purchaser. So what we can do is we can see how many properties are actually being marketed, what's the appetite, what people are actually looking for in terms of their properties, and also look at the transaction data that's coming through of what people are paying for those units, and seeing if that's slowing down or it's picking up. And that will help us gauge where we see the market going for the remainder of 2026. But in terms of unit supply, if we continue to look at 7,000 to 10,000 units, I think that is absolutely manageable. I think some of those projects are going to be supporting and helping improve the marketplace. And I don't think they will have a material impact in terms of the properties that are already on the market or the properties that are coming from off-plan to actually being handed over. Those are very, very positive opportunities for purchasers because the prices have remained relatively stable within, say, the off-plan. But once they get handed over, they then join the remainder of the market in handed over and secondary market units. And they will then follow the price trends. And again, if somebody's willing to pay 8 million or 9 million for a villa, that shows appetite. And that's where the price is then set for the next units.
Final thoughts and a final question, really. Anybody looking at Abu Dhabi for investment purposes or end user purposes right now, opportunities that stand out to you?
At the moment, I think Yas Island continues to offer a very good opportunity, and anything that's located close to Yas Island. I don't want to particularly pick out a developer or a particular geographic area, but Yas Island has remained very robust, very strong, even with projects coming on. Jubail Island is a great opportunity if you're looking for sort of high-end private villas. Then Sadia Island is obviously there's a mega project being developed at the moment, which is sort of at sort of the mid end of the market in terms of villas. So there's a good spread of opportunities, and I think if you're looking at end users, the quality is exceptionally good for the number of the projects that are coming online now and being handed over. Very high quality, good sized gardens, family orientated units.
Right.
Projects in buildings that offer good facilities. We're seeing improvements in the infrastructure in terms of schools, transport interchanges. We're looking at high-speed rail. Obviously, we haven't touched on it, but Etihad Rail now. We're looking at things like driverless taxis offering, there's lots of other things that are coming to the market that offer Abu Dhabi as being a place to purchase a unit. And when you look at investors, rental rates are going up. So there's a good level of return. And mortgage rates are relatively stable. So, it might mean more money in your pocket in terms of when you're actually buying a unit.
I've got my real estate bingo card, and I've got to cross through all the boxes there, It's ticking all the right boxes.
I hope so.
I appreciate it. Andrew Laver's Director of Property Consultancy, Cavendish Maxwell in Abu Dhabi. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Good to have
Great
you
to be
here. This is Mira Business FM.